Looks like we are a go. All right. Looks like we got everyone to go ahead and kick off our number 41, 41st webinar. Moving into our 40s. Can't believe it. Today, thank you for everyone who is with us, who has been with us from the beginning and who are joining us for the first time on Tour Management 101, where we continue to talk tour management and push forward a new generation of future tour managers. Today, we are going to take a look at a drive-in show with Doug and Karen. Oh, you know what? I'm actually going to leave it to Henry to introduce our guest and dive right into number 41, the drive-in show. I know.
I got you. Yeah. So, with the music industry in crisis, artists must find new ways to share and experience music together with their fans. So the crew are once again called on to do what they do best by innovating their way out of the problem so the show can go on. Today's class covers the growing trend of drive-in concerts during the COVID-19 pandemic by learning from the team that was just challenged to think outside the box when it comes to safety, while pushing new and old technology to the forefront of the advance. So first, we want to play you a clip of the two-night show that the band July Talk recently did in Ontario.
Okay. You guys see that?
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
That's tight.
I want to point out that that wasn't the actual show audio.
Still looks great. So, ladies and gentlemen, let's talk with the tour manager of July Talk, Doug Wilson, and Karen Weigold, front of house and production manager for July Talk. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Our very own Doug Wilson. We claim him now all day, by the way.
We love Doug. So happy Doug's here with us.
We're very lucky to have a TM on a show that's out right now. You know, that's a very rare thing, but it's growing. We figured this was a great opportunity to learn from you. Man, Doug, where do you want to start with this?
Well, yeah, we will be having, and thanks, sorry, the video freaked out there for a second, so I had to figure out how to stop it. But yeah, that was the unique sound of car horns celebrating the end of a show, which is something that took a second to get used to. But yeah, thanks so much, Karen, for being here. You know, Karen and I have worked together on and off with July Talk. Now for me, for 3 years. Karen's been with the band much longer. I think you said 7 yesterday, Karen?
Yeah, I think about 7 years.
Wow.
And we will have Leah and Peter from the band joining us in a second to discuss their conception of the show, their ideas behind it, but they're oil spotted right now. They're in a taxi trying to catch up with the bus right now, so they'll be joining us in a second. So we can dive right in. There was a lot from our side that happened on the front end of this show, and from my side of things, when this first hit my desk, we were right in the middle of the pandemic. Lockdown. Stores were barely even open here in Canada. Bars, restaurants were certainly all closed. So it was really difficult to get your head around how in, excuse me, 2 or 3 months time, we could even conceive of putting a show on for 450 people, 450 cars, excuse me. But that was the brief that was brought to us. So, you know, we kind of jumped into it a little bit blind, and we had to kind of go make a lot of assumptions on a production sense and also in a crewing sense, because, you know, we had no idea what the environment was going to look like on August 11th and 12th when those two shows kicked off. And oh, Henry, I think Peter and Leah are in the audience now, so we can bring them on, have them talk a bit more about from their side of things.
What name should I be?
Would be Peter Drymanis.
I'm not seeing that name.
We will figure out that technical issue right now, but
no worries. See what the name they use on Zoom. But, you know, for while we're looking at that, Karen, could you tell us, like, for context, like what? Well, actually, like, I'm curious. Like, you've been with them for 7 years, so you've seen the band must have grown so much over that time. But I'm curious of, like, what the core crew of July Talk normally is before you guys had to approach this. Like, give me some context first.
I mean, it's obviously evolved, especially in the past few years, but, you know, just your standard, like, front of house TM monitors, backline LD is kind of the typical go-to for them for a tour. But for this one, we obviously had to expand to include, you know, the really exceptional film element that was brought forth for this one as well, plus some additional, you know, lighting, audio support, just to get everything up and rolling with the time that we had allotted.
Sorry, I'm still looking for Peter's name to pop up here. Somebody want to take it?
yeah, sorry about that. Just trying to get those guys on here, but
no worries. Take your time. You're their tour manager. Please go.
Yeah. So, you know, it was a real challenge. As you saw from the video, you know, this wasn't a typical throw and go show style live footage. You know, there was an extremely high production value. And, you know, I'll let the guys explain that from their side, but, you know, with this band, it's very much, I think it's, of any of the bands I've worked for, the guys have more of a creative input than anyone else I've worked for, and some of the band members have a history in, you know, their background is in film production, so there are connections with that world, and there's a creative drive that comes from the band, you know, to make sure things are done artistically and creatively. And now we have them on the panel so they can take it and explain things further. It's can you guys hear us?
Yeah, totally. Sorry about
hey
that,
guys. How are you?
Doing good. I'm doing good.
Great to have you guys on the show. Thanks.
Welcome to Hollywood Squares.
Thank you for
Right,
joining.
well, that's great. Welcome to Hollywood Squares. That's great.
The show was really great. Can you guys tell us what was the conception of the show and what was your vision for this once you got the call to do it?
Yeah, so there's a woman named Vanessa that works for our management company at Six Shooter. who had the idea of July Talk doing a drive-in show just before the one happened in, was it Sweden or something like that, in March or April? Norway.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So it was just before that, and we thought we were all brilliant and unique, and then of course that one happened. But yeah, it was kind of right from the get-go. We were about to announce our big summer show, celebrating our third record, and right beforehand the COVID hammer came down, and so we didn't announce. And the minute that the drive-in idea came up, we really connected with it. So like we've always made all our own, or self-produced our own videos and stuff, because two of the members of the band, including myself, went to film school and have run a production company for a number of years. And so it's a very cinematic band. And then there's a guy named Adam Crosby who I went to film school with and has shot all of our videos. And he immediately came on board as the show's director. And I guess the idea was really exciting to us because of that sort of cinematic intersection in the band. And we immediately just kind of ran with it. And Louise, our lighting designer, designed the stage and had this brilliant idea off the bat to because there wasn't going to be a PA, because everything gets put through the car stereo, she made like a PA out of lights, so that the stage was sort of framed with these really beautiful tungsten highlights, and we got to work on all of this. Sort of a funny story, but our bass player was just like hanging out with his daughter on his front porch, and a teenager came out of nowhere and crashed on his bike, and Josh ran out along with another neighbor from a house next door across the street to see if this kid was okay. And after kind of caring for the kid and making sure he was all right, the other neighbor was just like, "Oh, what do you do?" "I'm in July Talk." "Oh, you're doing those drive-in shows. I've been trying to get a hold of you. I've been archiving drive-in commercials for the last 10 years, and I have hundreds of gigs of videos from the 50s, 60s, and 70s of all of these, you know, everything from the dancing hot dogs to like real strange pieces of work. And so it was such a treasure. Like the last few months, we just went through and built the whole show, all of these projections. We planned to have we got, sorry, I'm kind of going on a blabber here, but we connected with Panasonic because Doug and our whole crew had done this tour with Metric in stadiums last year in 2019, and Panasonic had given us a couple of RoboCams, like a couple of PTZs, and so we went back to them with this whole drive-in idea, and they really embraced it, and they ended up giving us, it was like 6 cameras and 3 projectors, and really allowed our budget to kind of loosen up a little bit. It was really stretched as it was, but so anyway, we got big 16-foot by 16-foot screen right behind us, which we ordered from So What, I believe, Doug, and then I made all of the content for that out of our videos and out of this drive-in footage. This hard drive we kind of acquired. We paid the guy to give us the drive, and then we set up these dummy amps on either side of the stage, and I made all like these like animated sort of glitchy lyrics that go along with our kind of album push. And then we worked with Tyler Sammy, who's our technical director, to figure out how to get this like 8 camera cut signal, first of all, to his media server at front of house, which is about 75 feet from the stage. And then from there, the cut feed, like the fully cut feed of the drone and the 7 other cameras, had to go another 325 feet to the concession building. The upstairs of the concession building had 3 projectors that sort of sprayed outwards onto the 3 screens on site. And then so we split that cut feed in that projection room into 5, the 3 projectors taking the 3 feeds, and then 1 going to the live stream upload. which was working with Bulldog Digital Media, which was awesome. And they did a fantastic job. Can't recommend them enough. They're really easy to work with. There was no Wi-Fi at all on site for us to use, so we had to bring in the cellular bonded networks. I think it was 3 or 4 of them, if I'm correct. And then the backup was ready to go at any time should the first feed go down. So yeah, that sort of was like the general infrastructure of it. We kind of ran with it creatively and had an absolute blast, and like just in how it kind of related to the band and felt quite organic. It didn't feel like we were trying to force something. Like it really worked with a lot of the like sort of short filmy stuff we've been making, I guess. And yeah, like the big thing that Karen can probably speak to better than I was like the latency issues. That was like the biggest obstacle of the whole thing, was trying our best to make it so that the experience was either synced to the screen or synced to the stage, and how those delays work over those long fiber runs was really interesting. And Karen and Dave had the fantastic idea of creating an extra radio transmission frequency that was synced to the stage, so that the audience that wasn't looking at the screens could just adjust their dial and get a feed that was synced with the snare drum, which was quite audible close to the stage, as opposed to when they were looking at the screen, they needed to be on a different channel so that they could sync up with that motion. So that was like, you know, the late.
I have a fast question about that.
Yeah.
Maybe and this is for either Doug or Karen on that note. So if you're going to put an extra little frequency in there, and is that a frequency on your end, or is that also an FM frequency that the concert goer has to dial a notch over on their receiver to sync up to, or is it handled like, does the user have to do an adjustment to get that, or is that all totally on the output end?
Well, we're jumping ahead a little bit here because we're going to get into this a little bit
Okay,
later.
so don't.
But,
So don't. Yeah, so don't.
I'll let Karen answer that since the question's there.
Yeah.
Before we get into that, I first want to say it is so refreshing to hear an artist go so deep into the technical talk of a show, and to hear you guys be so involved with all aspects. That's incredible. So, and it really showed. It's I'm not surprised that you guys have a background in film, because it like came out flawlessly. Like the skills and the people that you put together was quite honestly, like we've all been watching live streams for months now, and that was probably the best one I've seen. It
was really well produced and really flawed, like it was recorded. It was amazing.
It was really great. I watched the whole thing through and just loved the whole direction with it. It was amazing.
It's very kind. I mean, it's such a great community here in Toronto, and obviously, we're usually fighting over her with Daniel Caesar, and Louise we're fighting over with Feist and Bahamas and these other really great bands. And so it just felt so exciting to have this experience where everyone was home and everyone was available, and we got to just have except for one of our guitar techs, but still it was great. But it was just really like, it was a labor of love. And I think the biggest thing that came out of it, because there wasn't much money, like, we lost money on the shows, obviously, because of the high expenses, and then we'll be able to make it back through the piece of content that we created. But it's really like, it was incredible to see everyone work overtime and go so deep. And Adam Crosby, the director, he's worked in film in so many different ways, but you could tell that like him learning from Louise, learning from Karen, learning from Doug as to like how the live music world works was so exciting for him. And when you're watching the live stream, what you're actually seeing is the like meeting of so many different disciplines in a way that like, really like none of the technicians and artists really have had to deal with. When you think about it, like until you hit a project like this that's so multidisciplinary and so like multifaceted, each person can kind of stay in their lane. So it was cool to see those kind of lanes kind of merge.
It was a great coping mechanism for dealing with, COVID anxiety, because we kind of released an album and then obviously had no way of being able to play any of our songs. And I think a lot of the like the decision making of, for example, you know, just like where the stage went and having a drone camera and stuff like that, like we just realized that we needed to have a poster if we were going to get people on board. And so it was just like, well, the stage should, I guess, go between these two screens. And, you know, we like used a screenshot from the drive-in website where there was this drone shot flying over the drive-in, giving, you know, people an idea of what that looked like. And then obviously like the idea of, you know, we've got to show all the cars for people who are tuning in, like that'll be such a cool angle. And then yeah, and then, you know, normally putting out an album and being on album cycle, we spend all our time and energy being on the road, and rather than doing that, we were just yeah, like surrounding ourselves with the people who are amazing artists and problem solvers, and, you know, having hours and hours of meetings, just thinking of every possible thing that might come up and go wrong. And I think even for the first couple months, it was like, you know, you're having these meetings and then you're like disinfecting your groceries when you bring them home and stuff. And it was kind of like, are people even going to want to do this? Like, are we going to be allowed to do this? Is this going to be safe? Are people going to even want to leave their homes? Is this too close to the concert experience that, like, you know, we're all afraid of going back into? Because obviously what's been drilled into our heads is that gathering is unsafe to do.
We almost did it in July too. We almost took July 23, 24, I think, totally, or something.
But just having a crew of such talented techs and designers and artists who were willing to just also allow this drive-in show to be, you know, maybe part of their coping mechanism as well, and really like throw all their time and energy into it. And
your drive-in show is part of our coping mechanism. and all of our attendees too. We all were living vicariously through you guys and couldn't wait.
Sure.
Thank you for joining us yourselves and sharing.
I
wanted to ask.
Go ahead.
I'm sorry. I wanted to ask a creative question. So you have your regular, you know, the shows that you do or what you might have planned around your new material, and then things get shut down, and then you need to do a COVID drive-in show. And I know you had the synchronicities meeting over a bicycle crash with a guy who just happened to have been mining, you know, antique footage for you guys. How great! But I wonder how much of preparing for this show took you outside of the box of what you might have prepared for a traditional show. And then having done it now, anything that you did specifically for doing a drive-in show that you might put back into your regular arsenal? That's kind of that's two-pronged. That's you know.
I think that the biggest, first of all, I'm hoping that most of the work we've created in terms of our projection content will carry over into our shows long term. I mean, some of our older material we'd already had, because we had this, I don't know if some of you may know Suzanne Sasek, but she designed a stage for us for the last record. And so we had done some projection stuff in the past. So some of the content we could kind of draw from. And in my experience, it's really great to like kind of create that arsenal as new material comes up. You're just putting in for the new material and not necessarily redoing it constantly. Because I think fans can really look forward to kind of recurring projections as they arise and stuff. But anyway, I think that something that really made this experience different was, like Leia was saying, it was like when we made the poster, it was like really important that the poster made people feel calm about the event, you know? And so you kind of had this responsibility that you don't normally have when you're playing in like a traditional venue and the audience is used to going to that venue and understands the amenities and understands what they're getting themselves into. You had a responsibility within marketing and within telling people what you were doing to kind of make it feel safe and make it feel like a good idea that was thought out, you know, and not that they were going to walk into a Firefest mess, you know what I mean? Like, and so I think that really changed the way we approached it. I think that like there was a point about a week before the show where I felt very unsure whether I realized the scale and quality that we were working at, and I realized how great the show was going to be. And I wasn't sure whether, if I had known how deep we were going to get in, whether we would have like gone and looked for a media partnership earlier on to like push the marketing harder and get more eyes and ears on it for the live stream. And so I kind of had this like breakout where I had to go to our management and be like, I feel like we're too isolated in this, that we're going to make this insane thing and blah, blah, blah. And what I've realized afterwards, and I think it's a really learning experience for this whole drive-in idea, is that like everyone knows that drive-ins aren't really affordable to do, right? Like you can't go tour drive-ins because of the amount of cost of hiring the camera crew, all of that. But let's just say that we then are taking this piece of content and we're selling it to the streaming services that we've been chatting with. Then all of a sudden that business model gets changed, right? Like then we're kind of like doing, let's say, an annual show. Let's say that COVID doesn't go away, right? Like let's say that this is reality from now on. It starts to feel, oh, okay, well then maybe we could just do a drive-in show every year, tape it, and then sell it to a partner internationally. And then, you know, you're able to sort of tour the world in this kind of virtual way where you put all your eggs in one basket, you make an amazing show, and then that show can exist online for different people to interact with it on their own time in their own countries, you know, on the streaming service of their choice. Like all of a sudden there's like an optimism that is born in me when I think about that I'm like, oh wow, that this actually could be a beautiful kind of door, or like an option. Anyway, I'm rambling kind of apart from your question. I think that like
but thank you for sharing your thought processes with us. It's an honor to have you guys both be able to come on and talk about the processes creatively and internally. As you know, we're approaching an interesting new time, and while you're in the process discovering, wait a minute, this could lead to a new avenue for us. I mean, the growth that you're experiencing as an artist, we're really honored that you come on and share that with us. And thank you for being mindful in your concerns about not only just getting out there to perform, but also being able to promote your new material. We all know how important it is for you to get out and promote your stuff. So thank you for being so mindful about consumer confidence and you know, things like that are going to be challenges as we move forward. It's better that you guys at your level understand too, you know? So
yeah.
thank you.
Did you guys find it kind of awkward or kind of off-putting when you finish your song and being so used to hearing an audience clap and yell and scream and then hearing car horns honk? Did you find that a little offsetting, or did you just get used to it as the show went on?
I think I kind of got used to it in the way where, you know, there's a human being behind that horn, which is comforting. And yeah, like I just kind of kept feeling like this is like being in a really friendly traffic jam. Definitely the first, the friendliest traffic jam we've ever been in. Yeah, I don't know. It was definitely like, I think a little bit jarring. We also had seen a few videos of other people who had been, you know, like two of our friends just did a show singing with another artist, and we're posting videos on their Instagram and stuff. So we had seen like, okay, yeah, that is what happens. People are going to show their appreciation and love by honking their car horn, and it's kind of the only way for them, you know, like people would lose their voices if they were trying to scream loud enough for you to be able to hear them. Yeah, obviously, like not ideal. Don't want that to be the only way that we ever get to play a show or have crowd interaction or applause in that way. But it's like this is the making lemonade year, 2020.
There's growth in the unsettling feeling of trying something new, isn't there? You know, like I imagine not having a PA was probably a little difficult to, or different to get over. Team audio, in-ears? Have to, right?
Yes.
All on
All-
ear, everybody,
yeah.
right? So was it weird to play? Because you're just hearing the live band instruments off the stage, right?
Yeah.
Well, we always have like ambient mics that face forward, so we could kind of hear some of the like yelling and chatter and car horn honking.
Yeah.
I think that for me, like that we got side fills because we were talking to Karen about it and we were like,
Mm.
you know, it might just be too weird. We have to like, we're normally used to having quite a loud stage. We don't, you know, play to click or anything. It's pretty like traditional rock and roll setup. And like, I thought it was going to be weirder.
Yeah.
We didn't end up using the side fills because after talking to Karen, like we just wanted to bring our stage volume as low as possible so that the sound in the cars wasn't interfered with. And we weren't dealing with the latency issues. And so it was fine. I think that like the post song thing on live streams when people are playing at home is always so weird when somebody finishes the song and they're kind of like looking at the screen like awkwardly. This one, something that was astounding to me was how different the two nights were from each other. Like the first night, no one knew what the fuck was going to happen. It was a complete experiment. You know, the screens could have given out at any time. We had no idea whether the internet infrastructure was going to hold up. You know, it was a really, really standing out on a limb kind of moment, you know? And so looking out there, everyone was on top of their cars. You know, it was very energetic. It was very nervous energy. It was so intense. And then the second night was like, and everything went great first night, you know, and then the second night was this really calm, laid back, which often is the case with multiple night venues that we've done in the past, but it's like it just had a confidence to it, and everyone was mostly inside their cars, windows shut for the most part, and just really like knew what was going to happen and just enjoying the experience. But it was quite something how that sort of awkwardness and that like unsure energy communicated itself through our performance very heavily. Like I was just shaking, and you know, and then the second night it was just like, you know, just breathing easy, right? It was so interesting.
Yeah.
Well, you know, I know you guys are on a tight schedule today, so you know, thank you so much for joining us. I think the last 20 minutes or so are a microcosm of why it's such a pleasure to work for July Talk. And I'm not just saying that because my bosses are sitting here on the same call. You know, you're central in the creative process, and you're also always thinking of the crew, of anyone who's working on site, and of your audience, you know, above and beyond anything else. And that was from our first chat about the show. Our first brief was, number one, safety and security of everyone on site is paramount. Nothing comes nothing comes before that. And you know, that's why it's been such a pleasure working for the band for the last 3 years, and why this show was such a success, I believe. So thank you for that, and thanks for sparing some time for us today, you guys.
Not at all. It's cool
Yes.
cool to be a part of it. We've heard about this thing that you guys have been up to. It's awesome to be a part of it. So thanks.
Awesome.
Thanks for being here.
Thank you for
Thanks
joining
for
us.
joining us. Thank you.
We're gonna move into
Thanks,
all
guys.
the fun stuff on our side, get the advanced stuff.
Tell them about the 2 a.m. call.
Yeah, we
Heard about that.
Have a great day, guys. Thanks for joining
thank
us.
you.
Hi guys.
Have a good one. Cheers.
So, where are we?
That was great having them on, Doug.
Yeah,
They seem
thanks,
like
Doug. That was
amazing.
Lovely.
great.
Yeah, it really is. It really is a pleasure working for those guys. And you know, from the first production meeting, they were on every production meeting. Some of the 3-hour-long Zoom calls we had with all departments, the band were on there as well. So when their name is up there as creative directors of the show, it really means something. It's not, that's
Yeah, no, you can tell. I mean, really get into the tech of it. But then as well, it was cool to see how they trusted the team that they brought in, because each of you had different and new challenges that you had to figure out and bring back to the table and say, guys, this is what it is. This is what we can do. This is what we can't. And so I think that's really interesting. But we're gonna, for the rest of the class, we're breaking this down. If you've been watching before, you know that we've covered the steps that you'd usually take for every show. And so real quick, I just kind of want to know, in building the show, like, how was the venue decided on? Like, how did you plan this? Like, I heard about how the show sort of, the idea came about, but when it came to the nuts and bolts, where did it begin? I guess with the venue.
Yeah, I mean, there are an extremely limited number of drive-in sites, in Canada. I'm sure it's the same in the US as well. This was a designated, this is a functioning drive-in movie theater. So I know some of the sites for these have been parking lots with screens thrown up. This was this was and is a drive-in movie theater within an hour drive of downtown Toronto, which is where the band is from, and all of our crew are based, besides me. So it was kind of a no-brainer on that front. And at the point where I was brought on board, the venue was already confirmed, and 2 nights were agreed.
By the promoter? Confirmed by the promoter? Who was Live Nation?
Yes, correct.
Okay. Partnership with Live Nation, chose the venues. And so from there, man, like, I guess site walkthroughs would be the first place my mind goes, right? Like, but did you drive over to Ontario, to Toronto to see the site before you got deep into the advance?
We had a couple of production meetings up over Zoom with department heads and some of the creative people involved. But we had, I think, Karen, how many site visits did you end up going on?
I did 3.
Okay. So I think I was the only one. I wanted to respect, at that time, there was a travel restriction from Quebec, where I live, to Ontario. So I wanted to respect that. The band, Live Nation, Karen, who is our production manager and front of house engineer, as well as Louise, who is our production designer. They did a couple of site visits, which were extremely helpful in informing how we moved forward.
Like, imperative, like, you've never been there. You almost need to get on site. Karen, like, tell me, like, what were you thinking? I almost think like, I need measurements of this whole place. So like, what's your tech infrastructure? Where are the bathrooms? Like, what's the distance of everything? Like, what were some of the first things you were doing when you came on site?
I mean, from an audio standpoint, and I think Louise, our LD, as well, we kind of had this like initial idea of what we wanted to do. But again, like, that first site visit was just so imperative to how we approached it. The space is massive. It's literally, as you can see, it's just like fields surrounding it.
Okay.
Yeah, so it's like 400 feet to the concession, and then probably another like 200 feet to that furthest screen behind, where there were also cars stationed, and it was full. So yeah, I think the approach kind of evolved every time we did a site visit. The first time we went, obviously we got measurements, and we couldn't get into the tech room that first time, so we basically just got a lay of the land, and then we came back, and then we were able to kind of get in the concession booth and see what shape the transmitters are in, and see what shape the projectors were in, and kind of check out the existing infrastructure in that tech space to figure out what we could use or what we had to bring in. And then, my audio approach could just completely change from when I got the call initially to what we ended up going with.
Yeah, I bet, right? Like, have you ever had any experience with FM transmitters before this?
Not for a drive-in. Absolutely not. This was my first drive-in.
Since it was like an old drive-in with like really old tech, was it old boxes that were outdated that you were using, or was it had it been redone in the last decade at least to be able to transmit at probably the specs and bandwidth you need?
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, like one of the site visits was strictly for audio. Like I went with my two guys from our audio vendor, PRG. We brought a little mixer and a microphone and an iPod, and we literally just like plugged into each transmitter, drove around the entire site, noted where we had, little dropouts or interference. We did that for all 3 existing frequencies. And to be honest, like it was quite strong, and we didn't need to bring in any supplementary FM to rely on. We just used everything in house.
Good to know.
Karen, when did you decide to go with the RF and not go with PA? How was that decision made? Doug, maybe you want to jump in on this too.
I'll let Doug talk about the budgetary reasons, but I think just from a creative kind of audio standpoint, initially I think we were bringing someone else in to handle the live stream as well, and then over the course of phone calls and meetings, it was decided that I would do the live stream as well as the FM, as well as the concession speaker configuration we had up for people that were outside of their cars waiting in line for the bathroom and such. So for me, I think it just made sense to keep everything clean and clear. I don't think I would have been able to have such a great broadcast mix if I was focused on having a PA in front of me to listen to and had all of these other elements that I had to direct my focus to. With the FM and the broadcast and just the concession, I was able to really dial in the mix for everybody on site, and I didn't have to worry about sound levels bouncing back or bouncing around the space coming off of a live PA.
Yeah, and just further to that point, the decision to go without a PA was, I guess it was twofold. It was budgetary, and it freed up space in the budget for us to really push the live stream quality and max out as much as we could on that as a secondary product and also a secondary revenue stream. And also there was a secondary issue, which was encouraging social distancing. Like I said, this show was planned 3 months ago. So there was a thought that by putting up a PA, it's going to draw people towards the stage. It's going to draw people out of their cars. By doing it RF only, you really are encouraging people to stay in their cars or stay within the bubble of their car. And that was of an equal importance to us, because we've all now seen some of the blowback from certain drive-in shows, both in our industry and outside of it, with people not respecting the guidelines. And the environment here in Canada is a little different regarding that, and for the most part, people have been very respectful of social distancing measures. But people are still going to have a drink at a show and be drawn emotionally towards the stage. So we wanted to keep people in their cars, and 99.97% of people respected the guidelines without even having to be asked. So it really functioned well.
Doug, I have a quick question for you. Is it fair to say that your reason for going straight RF and not PA started out primarily to be budgetary, but then also ended up equally as important to how the execution of the event would go? And furthermore, if you had to do it all again, is it the same weighted priorities in how you approached PA versus RF?
Karen, do you want to take that one? Because we talked yesterday about how ultimately not using PA was beneficial to you in with the RF issues that came up with that extra RF field.
Yeah, I mean, I think for what we were trying to accomplish and the sheer size of the space and the time that we had allotted, I would definitely do it the exact same way all over again. I think it's just such a clean product. And as Doug said, I think it really kept people kind of tethered to their vehicles, you know, and like walking around that site, like, you know, I had a really excellent systems tech, and he was my ears on the ground during the show. You know, he's walking around, and it felt like a neighborhood party, you know, like people had their windows down and they might be standing outside or sitting in their trunks with the backup. And like, it was just a really kind of intimate gathering with everybody in their own space, you know, like, and I think it just worked out so well because everything was time aligned and everything flowed so nicely, and it was just so fluid, moving from, you know, your car potentially in the front row, walking to the concession where we had set up some speaker delays on top of the roof. Everything just like felt really natural, and it just felt like you were, you know, in your own backyard watching your buds play on stage.
And
Karen, could you touch base a little bit on how you synced everything into it? Because I know and how you made all the frequencies work with what was going on stage, what was going in videos. I know we touched base a little bit earlier, but could you get a little bit in depth into that and how you made that all work?
Yeah, can you repeat the first part? I think you cut out in that first part.
Oh, just and and how you synced it and how you used all the different frequencies to sync them together and make it all work and as a cohesive unit.
Yeah, the delay must have been crazy for something.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? Like you just said, like you're walking between like one field to another. That's got to be highly technical delays you're getting into, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think that, you know, the final delay from my world, from the stage to the video front of house, which is approximately 75 feet from the downstage edge, to the concession, which is another 325 feet from the video front of house. All in all, like to get out to the broadcast, we were sitting at approximately like between 450 and 500 milliseconds overall delay to sync the audio with the video. So that was the biggest challenge on the setup night when we were programming, because audio, lighting, and video, we all came back at midnight so that we could actually see the screens and kind of see those separate worlds all come together. So I think that was definitely the biggest challenge. And what we had to do, because there was like a golden circle seating VIP area right in front of the stage, we obviously want those people to have an excellent experience as well. And, you know, with a 346 second or millisecond delay on their frequency, it was just throwing everything at a time for them. So what we ended up doing was creating a separate frequency just for that golden circle, so that if they were looking at the stage from their car, they could tune into whatever the frequency was and everything would be time aligned perfectly. And they're watching the stage, you know, the snare from the stage hits at the same time it hits your ears in the car. And that was great. And then if they got tired of that and wanted to kind of see more of the content and just see it bigger, they could look to the side screens and tune into a different frequency, which was also time aligned to their car. So they did have to manually switch their frequency in their vehicle. I'll let Doug talk about what he did to kind of hone that in, but
quick question, Doug, how did you communicate to the patrons that there were different frequencies?
Well, so yeah, and just to put that in for anyone who's not super technical, as I am not, and had to have, you know, Karen and Dave, her systems tech, explain it to me. In practice, if you drove your car to one of those golden circle spots, as we did in soundcheck, and you switched to the wrong frequency, if you were on the other frequency, you would hear the snare, and if you had your windows open, you would hear the snare drum coming off the stage because you can't get rid of that ambient sound. And then you would hear it 500 milliseconds later coming through your car stereo. And so that's like it was horribly out. So it would ruin the show entirely for you. So, you know, it was, and that, you know, there were sections in the arena where there was an overlap, and yeah, I mean, all of the screens had a frequency underneath them that would have
Got
been,
it.
you know, so
Okay.
when you look at the screen and it says tune into 90.5.
Great.
But people in the golden circle, we printed off a one sheet for them with a very simple explanation, and I actually walked, it was only 40 cars or something, so I walked around each car, explained the process to them, and explained that it was an incredibly challenging thing to pull off, and people were, you know, for the most part, very receptive to that.
Cool. And before we move on, really quick, don't go deep on this. Did you guys offer anything other than gold circle placement to those gold circle purchasers? Really quick, any swag, anything other than here you get to be super close and that's your gold circle situation? Anything else for them?
Yeah,
Cool.
there was no conversation about doing meet and greets or things like that.
No, right. But sometimes it's a swag bid or a merch thing or a, you know, I just
same thing because it's a
Yeah.
package you're selling, right? Like
right.
To
So
my
was it just seating, or was there any kind of little cute package that you thought up at all?
Not that I'm aware of.
Okay, cool. All right. Moving right along.
Good
Sorry,
answer.
so many questions, Jim. I'm sorry. We just inquiring minds want to know.
No worries. Chris, to finish up the audio part, we already kind of discussed that. You know, you went with RF instead of PA. Was that initially a controversial decision, or how did that come about? I know we touched base when the band was on, but what was kind of the thought process that went into finally deciding to go with the RF and not with a live PA?
I don't think there was any controversy. I think it was, this is going to be the cleanest, best way to deliver your show. And, you know, you've obviously met Pete and Leia, and like the rest of the band are the same. Like they're all lovely and they get it. You know, if you tell them something's going to work better a certain way, they're super receptive and they'll take a chance on you. And, you know, hopefully you can follow through with it. But I definitely think that, you know, for what we were trying to do specifically, not to speak about any of the other drive-ins, but not having a PA was probably the best decision we could have made.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, yeah, like Karen said, you know, they're pragmatic people. We've established trust with ourselves in the band, so there was no real, you know, there was no real concerns about doing RF only that I can recall.
So what was entailed for video, and how did you decide to go with projection because that was what was there, or did you go with projection because that was your show? Was video ever considered via projection, or was it always projection that was going to be part of the show?
Well, the video part of the show was probably the most complicated thing to pull together. The film crew that we pulled in were, as you saw, incredibly creative. But they're a film crew. It wasn't a standard vendor supplied video team who are used to working on live productions. And the same would go for our, there was two separate elements. There was the film crew who were cutting everything that you saw on the live stream and also the large screens, but there was separate pre-cut content that was being projected onto the upstage backdrop. As well as front projected from a couple of small projectors onto a line of guitar amps and also the kick drum. So our video director, the film director, Adam Crosby, who Peter referenced earlier, was working in tandem with Tyler Sammy, who was our projections director, and neither of them are super used to working on live production. So, you know, and there was a lot of crossover between their worlds. They were interfacing a lot, and the setup they had was not a traditional video setup. That's about as far as I can take it with my understanding of it. But to you know, the decision to go with projections was based on what was available on site. There were 3 screens already with 3 high quality projectors provided with the venue rental. So that was kind of a no-brainer. And then we augmented that with, as Pete said earlier, the Panasonic, who were one of our sponsorship partners on the show, provided cameras and also projectors. And as anyone who's rented projectors know, they're expensive pieces of kit to rent. That's a real chunk in the production budget.
That's a big piece of the pie right there.
Yeah. So to have it 3 projectors rented on stage as well as 6 cameras, that's a good old chunk of change in your production budget. So
I noticed in watching the show that there's a lot of choreography and specific shots. Does your band usually do choreograph the show, or is it usually more organic?
That was really the first time that I can recall in the period I've been with them that we've choreographed a show to that extent. You know, I don't want to speak for them, but the sense I get is that, you know, it's an energetic show. It's a rock show. They really have a strong bond with their audience. So with this being a little bit different, and all you could see really from the front of the stage was the pit with the film crew in it, and then a row of headlights. So you can't even see the faces of the audience you're performing for. So I think that maybe gave the band a little bit of space to approach the show differently, and work on some set cues and a bit more choreography. So yeah, that was a conscious decision. You know, we had to hit certain points for certain cameras. And with some of the pre-roll footage that again Pete referenced earlier that he found from his neighbor, we tried to make the integration of that as seamless as possible into the show, so that it wasn't us just switching on some pre-roll footage. We wanted to flow from the live performance into that cut footage and then back out of it. So there was a lot of thought in you know, making sure that all tied in together. So yeah, that was definitely a consideration.
Moving on to lighting, I noticed that the show is black and white for the whole show. Is this a usual look for you? And then from lighting, is this something? Was this a usual show for lighting, and what you usually do? Is it the current design, or was it changed to handle the projection and to handle the live show? And what was the process on that?
Yeah, the band's aesthetic is always black and white. And that's a real challenge for building a lighting show that really tests the designer's abilities and their creativity, because, you know, there's even on, you know, you saw the stream in black and white, but there was no color on stage, even for those people that were present. So Louise, who is our production designer, did an amazing job. And, you know, one of the coolest features was the fake line array that she made out of Jarags. That was
Right.
such a unique touch. It looked so realistic that the audience didn't realize that it wasn't speakers, you know. Oh. And then when it lit up 3 songs into the show, I don't think you got I don't know how much of a zoomed out picture you got of that on the stream, but it really it was really impactful there. But yeah, to answer your question, definitely the lighting had to be adapted to not overpower the video elements. So we had a few creative meetings between video, film, and lighting to make sure that the show was going to work together, and that there weren't certain points where lighting was going to, you know, blow out the video content.
That's great.
Question for you, Doug. Was there any, did you find that you guys had to take in the headlights into consideration at any point? Was there an adjustment once you got there and saw, oh my God, headlights?
Yeah, all the patrons were told they had to switch their headlights off, but there are some models of car that if you have the radio on there, or if you have the power on the ignition, they have like their side lights on. So
yeah, you're going to get running lights.
And the car that she stood on was our manager's car. That was all staged. That SUV that was parked in the front row, and that was one of those cars. So, you know, 5 minutes before doors, we realized that their lights couldn't go out, so we had to go and tape over their headlights. There was a couple of cars like that. But, yeah, things you don't think of when you're approaching a normal show.
Clearly. Okay, so we go to budget. Let's talk how you even start to budget something like this.
Yes. With a lot of difficulty, it would be my first answer.
Right.
The easy parts, though, like a lot of it you mentioned were home-based, right? So a lot of the travel's already off the table.
Right. So we know that you guys are local. Yeah. So you touched on that. So you're the only one that had to, so that's that expense. But, you know, when you're talking about going out and getting quotes, are you reaching to your vendors? What was your process to start to fill in those line items?
Yeah, I mean, I have a great relationship with our 2 vendors, Solotech.
And let me ask you this. Did you start out with a budget that you were trying to hit, or did you just try to put it together spec-wise and see where you came to and work from there? What was your thought process?
Yeah, that's actually a great question, because I don't think you can use this show as in its entirety as a blueprint for other drive-in shows. My first brief and my first call was with the band was, we want to do something special.
Okay.
We want to make this an album launch. We want to, do something really great. So that gave me a little bit of context that we really, there is room there for play, and we want to push the production and make it look and sound better than some of these other shows that have been happening.
So question for you, in your mind, did this somehow, and maybe, from the band's perspective as well, suddenly this is sort of now a promo show, not just, an average everyday gig, which is meant to, in a new business model that we're trying to understand, but it has that other element that we've touched on previously, which it's now really a promo show because they've dropped a record.
Yes, very much so.
Okay.
There was a blurring of the lines between the two, but my first port of call was I put a call into both of our vendors, Solotech for lighting and video, and PRG for audio, and those are long established relationships, even predating myself with the band. So I had a great call with both of our contacts there, and Karen, took it forward with PRG, and we just kind of brainstormed a bit for a while, weeks and weeks. We kind of fleshed out where we wanted to go with it, because we were all in new ground. Even our vendors, who are the experts in these things, they were, very few people have put on RF only drive-in shows.
Right.
So yes, I kind of, first port of call was get in touch with them, let them know what we're doing. Obviously they're sitting with warehouses full of gear right now, so as soon as a gig comes up, we're priority number one for them. So that was one thing that was great about this whole process, is everyone's available and everyone's kind of sitting on their hands at the moment.
All right, good question. But question about that. So we know that the houses are very quiet right now because no one's working. I'm hearing from other people that are doing things out there that there's an interesting, some people are getting very low pricing from their vendors because no one's working and everyone is happy to get a little bit of more salary of work. Other people are getting charged, what we're hearing is COVID pricing. So can you talk a little bit about where you came in that regard?
Yeah, I mean, like I said, we've got great relationships with both, so I can have a frank conversation with them.
Right.
And I did have a frank conversation with them, and it went along the lines of, look, you and I both know that the budget on this show is not going to be that of a normal show, but equally, I don't want to go gouging my vendors at a time where their survival is threatened as well.
Doug, when you added the promo element, did you get some hard dollars to contribute to your budget, or was it just theoretical?
I mean, I kind of have to be careful in getting too deep into
sure, not numbers, but just
budget,
did you able to add something to it?
Yes, I mean,
okay, cool.
And the partnership with Panasonic helped, because they help with things, rentals that would have been additional and significantly additional to our production budget.
Right, and that answers JP's question in the Q&A a little bit about were there partnerships that helped you along in this particular thing. So yeah, clearly Panasonic aided.
Yes, and some of the camera vendors who are, the band have long-standing relationships with from their previous life in the film world, like White's and Dasmo, Grande Camera, who provided a lot of the film rental side of things. They were able to they were able to help us on the budget side of things for us giving them credit on the screen pre-show, and I believe that went out on the stream as well. So they were the four or five partners who contributed. I think Monster Energy, Panasonic, Grande Camera, and White's. They were given advertising space pre-show, both on the stream and in person. So that was something that we could offer to help ourselves out on the budget side of things.
Just I want to ask you if you think this model, based on what you were able to put together and execute, if you didn't have the additional promo and without the contributions of your sponsors, I'm just curious to know, in your educated, experienced opinion, if you think that the business model would be sustainable if you were going to do even a maybe just call it a 1 month run? Could you?
I find it hard to believe.
Okay. I just want to know if you've come up with anything different than, you know, there have been one-offs and there have been clusters, but there doesn't seem to become a model where anything now having been be able to sit here with you go, so now that you've done it and you can really look at the receipts and the grosses versus actual outlay, in your educated opinion, could you do a tour?
I think no. That I would caveat that with the fact that we did go. We could have slimmed down. We could have
Right.
cut the streaming element. We could have done it with a production value that didn't match the band's expectations. But I still find it hard to believe that without any support, that would be a viable option.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
Fair enough. Okay. Over to my friend Mark on you and your gang and how you guys, you know, your numbers and how you did this.
Yeah, Doug, can you run through your crew, band, audience? How many people were there both nights? Can you tell us the variances between your crew, core crew, vendor crew, and so forth?
Sure. Yeah. July Talk's a band that in Canada, here in Canada, you know, typically we'll do multiple nights at theaters, or you know, the last tour we did was a co-headline arena tour, but then we'll cross the border and come to the US and do clubs. So it's a challenge crewing that. We will be anything normally from, in Canada, 15 to 20 people plus vendors, to the US 8-9 people including band, you know. So on this one, again, going back to when the show first came about, we were under the impression we were going to have to staff this on a skeletal basis and keep things as tight as possible. And then ultimately on the show days, our band and crew plus film crew was 50, 51, 52, something like that. So it ballooned into something bigger. Core crew was fairly standard, you know, 8 to 10 people. Vendors, we had to keep tight for budgetary reasons. So 3 audio, 2 lighting, 1 video. And then, sorry, not 1 video, 3 video, you know, including the techs that we hired separately. Then band was, the core band is 5. We had 3 additional musicians. The film crew is up to, I want to say 10 to 12 people. We had a documentary crew filming backstage. We had some site dressing people. So yeah, it ultimately became quite a large crew. Patrons, there was 450 cars per night, and those could buy tickets per car, but you could also, I think that gave you 2 people in each car, and then you could buy an additional ticket per car, which you could attribute to a car. So, and you know, those tickets were sold out in minutes when the show first came up. And then the live stream was a flat, you know, $15 per person. So, you know, the size of the crew and the pop-up nature of this made it even more challenging to approach the COVID-19 restrictions, which, as you know, we mentioned before.
I have a question.
Yeah, go ahead.
Did you guys have to share the live stream revenue? Did the band have to share the live stream revenue with anyone that you're aware of? Did they get to maintain that revenue?
I wasn't privy to those conversations.
Just out of curiosity, would love to know.
It's worth noting too that half of the cost of the live stream ticket went to a local charity as well.
Nice.
So really, that's like half the ticket cost is going to, there's a list you can find online, but a local charity in each market.
Interesting. That's almost sort of a de facto answer in a way to that's cool. That's very nice to know.
Doug, no,
Doug, you were just saying, sorry, Mark, did you still have another question?
I had one question. Did you find the increase of crew, did you treat them all as one kind of umbrella in your world, or was a lot of the teams being facilitated within their own companies and things like that? Were you just focused on your core crew, or were you handling everyone that was on site?
Yeah, that was a little bit of a challenge, but I took the film crew have their own processes within their team, but I made sure that everyone was covered from in terms of scheduling, catering, site info, working protocols. I treated them all as one crew. But when it came to division of labor, obviously within their own team, I left the film crew to it because they operate differently from touring.
Got it.
I want to go back to something you just said before about the safety measures, because everything we're talking about is somewhat familiar to us, but none of us have had to advance COVID-19 safety measures, So it's like you're pulling information from a lot of different sources. I'm sure Live Nation has their own set of protocols that they're working with you to instill across the show. Within yourself as a tour manager, need to ask like what parameters are you going to set up? Like I want to walk through that real quick because that's all new to all of us. Everything from like getting tested to like hand sanitizing stations, and then Karen as well. Like I've thought about this, and I kind of would. And pragmatically, I would think like I need to come up with like a list of things that I can do differently or think outside the box. But I would also look to my crew, and each person, the crew chief or a person of each department, to tell me what they need now to do their job safely and in a better way. So it's like, how did you approach that? Both of you, give me some input on how I even start to advance health and safety measures.
Yeah.
Well, I think from a production standpoint, I mean, obviously, like changing the way we line check and changing the way we set up was a huge thing, right? You can't have techs talking into vocal mics anymore. So just being like extra cognizant of what space you're occupying wherever you are on the day, and there's a couple people within our core crew and within the band that are kind of bubbled together. So that did alleviate a little bit of that. But I mean, from an audio standpoint, like we definitely had to change protocol of how we set everything up. Like normally we're all hands on deck. We all just kind of jump in and do everything. So sitting back and like letting specific people do specific jobs was kind of a different approach just for myself personally, because I'm so used to being everywhere all the time. And obviously, like, line checking and just making sure you wash all the microphone capsules thoroughly. They're disinfected. When you're line checking, you're swapping out the mic to test the line, like just to make sure nobody's talking into anything that anyone else is going to potentially be talking into. So that was something we were definitely cognizant of all day.
That's amazing to think of, like that your lead singer's microphones have to be so protected, and maybe a discussion with them on like, hey, it's probably safest if you, after you've cleaned it, like it's probably safest if you keep this with you. And so you're the only person handling it and using it at a certain point. Mm-hmm. But Doug, touch on that, and then tell me like what you had to do for like hygiene stations and masks and gloves. How did that all work out?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, yeah. Just as to what Karen was saying there, we had rehearsals at one of our vendors in the couple of days running up to our build day, and we had to pull everyone in and just work through our protocols together and see how, like Karen said there about line checking, we just had to sit down and come up with solutions that were going to enable us to respect the guidelines. In terms of advancing, like you said, Live Nation have had a set of working protocols. I consulted them and one or two others for events that have happened already, and compiled my own for our crew. And those were fairly, what you might imagine. Everyone was wearing masks, even though we're outside. Everyone was wearing masks all day, every day. Hand sanitizer was everywhere. Gloves are actually discouraged. The only time we used gloves was with our backline techs handing off instruments to musicians, and then those gloves were trashed immediately, which, every other instance of using gloves are discouraged. So that was something that came up close to show.
Wow.
And we encouraged all of our crew to be tested. We couldn't enforce it, but we strongly encouraged, and most people did. And everybody did their absolute best to maintain social distancing. I'm not gonna, it's impossible to, when you're hustling, when everyone is incredibly busy, it is impossible to not step within somebody's distance in real life scenario. But and that was a challenge, was also to keep it in mind when you're exhausted after 20 hours of being in the baking sun with a mask on. Having not worked in 5 months, the rust was very real on day one, and it, approaching that 20th hour, to keep in mind to keep your mask on if you've just smoked a cigarette or had a drink of water was a challenge. So we just had to keep on top of it. I had my eye on everyone. Our runner was also a consultant for Live Nation, so he was doubling up on that task. So yeah.
I'm curious about how did you make changes in the schedule, like overall, from like over the build days to accommodate any COVID measures of sending crew in waves? Because I find that people are trying that to layer in the steps, but it's essentially doubling the amount of time it's going to take to build a show. So did you experience any of that, or how did you work against the schedule that you have?
Yeah, Karen, maybe you want to take that one?
Yeah, well, Louise, our LD, and myself kind of came up with the load in and load out schedules, just because we knew we had to be hyper aware of everyone. That said, we were so tight for time. So we did our best to kind of build backwards based on how much time the stage took to build, how much time the lighting rig that needed to be flown could get up. So, we did the best we could to stagger it. I think we were about an hour apart from each other, lighting, audio, video. And we each kind of started in separate areas, So I built like my front of house area. We waited till the stage was completely clear before we let video up there. And then again, before we let any audio up there. So we really tried to be aware of how we divided the time, but also utilize every minute of it, because we really didn't have a lot of time to get everything in, because we couldn't get in that extra day, So we were kind of fighting protocol, but also fighting time as well, because it was a big show to put up in one day.
That's I think I would feel a lot of pressure in that situation, because the pressure of being safe first and foremost, but then having the show pressure of meeting the expectations. That's tough. Doug, how do you deal with that, man? I mean, did you feel safe?
Yes.
Yeah. You do it like that again? Like, does that format of working around each other as you build shows right now?
Well, I guess we were ring fenced by the times that we only had the time we could work in, and we knew that we had there was a lot going on, a lot to achieve in a very short space of time. And that was one of the real concerns as we were advancing this show. But yeah, I think I trusted the skills and abilities of everyone in my team. And I had to believe that we could get it up and running in that time. We had a hard deadline of when the live stream was going to go live. So, there really weren't many other options.
It's the best and worst skill we have in our industry. We will always rise to the occasion, won't we?
Yeah. But, the night before the show, when my call time was 6 a.m. to come in with lighting, and I get a call at 10 p.m. to say, there is an issue, and I revised my call time to 2 when the stage was going to arrive. So that extended my day by 4 hours, and just, things like that, really, they're always going to pop up, and you just have to adapt to them.
Good point. Yeah.
Can you show us the sitemap? and so everybody can get an idea of what you were dealing with?
So we saw the overall sitemap earlier. Here is here's Louise, one of Louise's last technical drawings for the sitemap. So you can see we have the buses, which were, I don't know if we touched on that yet, but we used 2 buses from a local supplier as green rooms. Everyone was local, so everyone was kind of bubbled and driving to up and down to site together from Toronto. But with there being no real on-site facilities, we were able to reach out to one of our bus companies up here in Canada, whose buses were sitting doing nothing. So we managed to negotiate a good deal to be able to have their drivers bring them up and just use them as green rooms for a couple of days, which was really amazing because it was hot. So to have AC there rather than just a couple of porta cabins, it meant we could have a band, the stage left band green room and stage right production office and crew room. You can see we put in a temporary front of house structure 75 feet from the stage. That was just a tent on, and a couple of risers where video and lighting were set up. And then we had a throwback from there to the concession where the on-site projectors and audio transmitters were. Karen was set up in a tent off stage left because there was no PA. So we tried to maximize the, minimize the footprint of our front of house to allow us to max out on the cars that we could fit on site. So we lived Karen over here with her front of house desk, and the reference truck behind her that we used to check, that our systems tech Dave used to check the on-site audio. And I think the only thing not shown on here is the projector that was on a riser on the upstage, on a 10 feet riser built on rough ground just behind the upstage. And then you have, camera positions down in the pit.
I don't know if this was answered, but what dictated the 75 feet to front of house?
Karen, you want to take that?
Honestly, it was just kind of like an ideal spot that our LD had requested just for programming and a nice view of the show that was unobstructed, but also wouldn't obstruct many other vehicles. So there's a nice little like laneway kind of off house left a little bit. So we were able to kind of fit them in there without impeding on the view of any of the cars behind them.
That's
So
probably kind of like that. It's rare they get to pick their own spot, right?
So, and how once you got into it, like, did it pretty much run just like a normal day? Like, how did you deal with catering? How did you, just like the normal little day-to-day stuff we've touched on? Once you got rolling, how did it go?
I mean, like I said, there was a bit of rust on day one and everyone's bodies were in agony after the first day. There were muscles that I forgot we even used. But I mean, to talk about catering, we couldn't, with a crew of 50, we needed to have some sort of catering, but on-site buffet style wasn't going to be an option because of the COVID restrictions. So we had a local caterer who was we really lucked out, to be totally honest with you. A local restaurant, I reached out to them and, I reached out to him to see if he could accommodate an order for that size of people. And he came back and offered to cover the whole 3 days that we were on site, every meal catered. So he gave us 3 options and I will share this with you now. So I set up and this shows the benefit of this webinar. I used Google Forms on the advice of my colleague Henry over here and set up this really straightforward crew ordering form. So you can see here, we got the lunch and dinner times, department name, department, lunch and dinner selections, and then any allergy notes.
That's awesome.
Mhm.
And on my side, I can see all the names of all my crew, which department they're in, and what they ordered. So, you know, it gives me a printout of what orders I need to put in with my supplier, and any allergies or intolerances down here. And I can zoom in on who they are and send all that info over to the caterers. And that worked out really well. So they would box everything up and bring it to site already boxed up. So it worked out really well, actually.
That's a piece of brilliance right there.
I love it, man. That is so good.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. And then once you got to the show, I mean, you know, I think we touched a little bit on this, but it sounds like people were pretty good about staying near the cars, that the RF kind of solved that issue for you.
Yeah.
So no
Yeah, that was definitely
craziness.
No, I think the only tiny minor flashpoint was when Leia did the standing on top of the car routine. There was a couple of people who were drawn towards it, but security was on hand. They were briefed to take a very much a hands-off, respectful approach, which is always our approach with this band. And they just, you know, people were very, very respectful all the way through the site. You know, I walked around, I spoke to people in their cars. I wanted to get a sense for how the show was going and how people were. And 9 times out of 10, people were just so thankful to be at a show. And so, and there was a lot of emotion with people. They were just, you know, they were excited to be at live music, to see live music again. And so they were very, very respectful of the guidelines, I would say.
Good to hear.
Hey, Doug, can you talk to us a little bit about how y'all's team approached merchandise? I know we touched briefly on that yesterday, and just the whole process around that and how you set merch up for fans for this experience.
Yeah, and I did see a question in the chat earlier. Merch was on sale. Everything was ordered via the online store. There was no there was a merch table set up by the concession building, but we had a bunch of pre-orders which were all packaged up individually, ready to go. And then we did allow sales on site, but they had to be ordered via the website. And then the person was given a pickup window of when they could go and collect their merch. So that stopped any it stopped like a giant line forming at the merch stand, and that worked really well. We did a bunch of sales, and everything seemed to run really smoothly. We have our merch company are great, and they were super proactive on setting that whole thing up. So I really
and they were ready with an app for you and a bit of a process to do delivery, pickup and delivery curbside, as we call it out here in the new world, where you're ordering things online and picking up curbside at your designated time, right? Okay, yeah. Good deal.
I think they knew that we would have our hands full on this show, so I really didn't, other than setting my merch seller up with an area, and you know, it was all kind of dealt with out of my hand.
Did you guys see lots of good merch sales? Were people feeling, wanted to commemorate the experience?
Well, they did a bunch of they did a couple of t-shirt designs that were specific for the show, which I think are still on sale on their website. So those were super popular, and yeah, they seem to do well.
Doug, I wanted to just ask you one really fast question. When you were talking to people in their cars, you said most 98% of everybody was positive and really jazzed on the whole thing. If you had a patron concern, can you briefly touch on what that might have been, just so we can have an idea of what the hot spots might be?
Yeah,
brief.
Of across 2 nights, feeding back with management and with Live Nation, and you know, I saw a couple of Live Nation questions. I can't really speak for Live Nation, you know. We've worked with them for a while, and they worked with us closely on this show, and that's really all I can really say on that front. But there was one issue where I think a patron had paid to be in the golden circle, and I think there was maybe just a little bit of a challenge between wanting to view the stage and the performance that was happening over here versus what was happening on the screens. And I think before the show started, people were, maybe if there was one or two issues, it was because they wanted better sightlines to the stage. But then the show came up and they realized what a great product was happening on the screen. That kind of mitigated anything, I think. And maybe, I think maybe a little bit more communication on the RF, on the fact that there was going to be no PA present. But I think that was really it. The 2 nights went off without a hitch for the most part.
How far in advance of this showtime did you open doors, may I ask?
Doors were 7, show was 9:30.
Okay.
And that was one thing that was seamless, was the relatively seamless was, with this being a drive-in site that, they host movies 7 days a week, from 7 p.m. till 2 a.m. So they're used to getting people in and out of the site, and it's on a small country road, so we didn't have too many issues with site egress and things like that.
Is that their team that's sort of the parking ushers?
Yes, and that was managed by Live Nation. They were kind of coordinating the on-site managers who were coordinating their site team, and they you could probably see from the map that I showed at the start there, the site has natural embankments which kind of face the cars up towards the screen a little bit, so they have their processes of getting everyone in and sighted, which seem to run pretty smoothly.
I feel like that's a perfect segue into, and you've touched on some of these points. Can you go a little bit more in depth on like how the traffic was? Was it bad getting in or out? And like who was handling security? Like who hired their deployments, and was there enough security you felt for your show?
Yeah, like I said, traffic obviously naturally backed up a little bit directly before doors, but the site is it's set off the road. It has its own access road, so they could stack the traffic up pretty far before it started building up on the road outside. Like I said, there the on-site team were the ushers, if you want. Security was outsourced and briefed on. We had a couple by stage, then roaming teams just enforcing the social distancing and keeping everyone who was moving between their cars and the bathrooms or the concession, keeping them moving and not congregating. But people seem to be taking the initiative on that front, and I think people are into this swing of dealing with how to be in public right now. So the security were certainly very hands off to my eyes. And yeah, I think we didn't have any issues with people congregating down by the stage. 1 or 2 people would wander up and then realize that they couldn't hear anything and then go back to their cars. So that says to me that the RF only worked.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, I think it went off pretty well on that front.
Great. Thank you.
So this is something that isn't specific to this show. Our students might deal with this a lot, actually, when dealing with artists. What happens if your artist wants to work with a non-traditional venue, like one that doesn't usually have shows at it like this? Like, what were the challenges that you dealt with? Because they're not just specific to, being during this time. It's like when your artist wants to be like, I want to do a drive-in show, or,
Yes. Karen, do you want to take it from a production side of things?
I definitely think the communication is so much more important when you're dealing with a non-traditional venue, because they don't know the lingo, they don't know the time it takes, they don't know how many people it takes to put something on. So I definitely think, really breaking it down and staying on top of whoever is the contact on site is super crucial to it. Like, to the point where like you feel like you might be a little bit, condescending or baby talking. Like, you need to just say, hey, listen, these trucks are big, these trucks are coming in, like, you know, we need to come in at 2 a.m. because it takes 4 hours to build the thing that everything goes on top of. Like, you have to explain that to them. And I think if you do that, you know, and they seemingly understand, at least you're in a good starting place, and you can start to build your schedules accordingly and just talk through any concerns that they might have as well. Because obviously, if it's their space and they own it, like, they're going to have some concerns with a production of this size coming in. So I think just being like collaborative and communicative with the venue staff and all of the venue staff, or as many of them as you can, like, I think that is very, very crucial to coming into a non-conventional space.
Yep.
Yeah, absolutely.
Managing people.
That's a great way to put it. It was when you deal with a theater that's used to putting on shows, you don't have to define what things mean. You don't have to define why you need to bring in something at 2 a.m. because it takes 4 hours to build the stage, you know? So that was certainly a learning process on this, was putting things in context for you know, the venue in a way, and explaining why we have to come in so early and why we need a whole day of building, because otherwise the show is not going to happen.
And also making sure that someone from their team is on site with the keys to let you into the tech booth so that you're not locked out.
Oh, God.
And how about infrastructure? You know, I know this kind of rolls into communication, but you know, they might tell you they have something, or they may or may not include what a normal venue would be including, which is something to factor in.
Yeah, and I think that goes back to the importance of site visits, getting your own eyes and ears on what is there, and like Karen said, taking the little mixer with the mic up there and testing it yourself, seeing what power is where, seeing the distance yourself, and seeing the lie of the land. You know, our forklift nearly got bogged down on the load in, tipping the truck because the ground was really pretty soft. I think had it rained, we'd have been in a whole bunch of shit on day one. Thankfully, that stayed off for the most part, but there's no substitution for getting you or your team's eyes and ears on the ground and seeing the lie of the land firsthand, really.
Yeah.
Wow.
Amazing. Doug, so as we move into, and thank you so much for being willing to bring your fabulous artists on and letting us sort of chop this up 6 ways from Sunday, you know, and micromanage the questions. If you were going to now do this again, what advice can you share with the rest of us who might be looking to do an endeavor like this moving forward, or somebody who's heading into the advance for a drive-in with their artist?
It's hard to say if I would do much different. I think, without patting ourselves on the back too much, I think the shows went off without a hitch. I think the RF only was the right call to make. I think it changed it from being a pale imitation of what we normally do to being a unique experience. So if you put up a PA and people are standing by their cars, but they're not able to really lose themselves and get into the show, that's just a substandard live show. If they're sitting in their car and they're having this unique retro sort of experience of going to a drive-in movie theater. You know, I didn't even know drive-in theaters still existed, to be totally honest with you, prior to 4 months ago. So if you're able to give them this nostalgic experience of watching a show and listening to it on their stereo, and by the way, it sounded phenomenal in my car stereo, it really, really did, then those people are not going to forget that time they watched a show in a car in a field in the middle of a pandemic. I think making it a unique experience rather than a substandard version of what we normally do, I think was certainly an objective, but it came out in so many different ways than we even expected it to. I would have loved to have had more time on site. I really, really would have. I would have loved to have not flogged everyone on that first day, because that was extremely tough on everyone to come back and dive into the deep end with weights on their feet. I think that was really, really a challenge. And
because Doug, you mentioned that you were also working around, like they were still showing movies
Right.
right,
while you're building, right?
Yeah.
I don't know if that was mentioned earlier. You're still, what were they showing?
Oh, what? Hey, Karen, what were the?
I think around midnight was 40-Year-Old Virgin, and the other screen was Pineapple Express.
Really,
There were
really
the more adult movies. I think Shrek was like in the first round or something.
So there was plenty of activity going on your site. So Doug, from an operations point of view, from advancing, you know, what are some of the things that you might recommend people look for in their advances and the way they're taking on these advances?
Well, taking advantage of the fact that everyone has so much more time on their hands for the most part, and getting all your because we are in new ground here. You know, no matter how good a production manager you are, no matter how good a tour manager you are, you probably haven't done a drive-in show, and that probably goes for your team as well. Get everyone on a call together, multiple calls together, get everyone on multiple Zooms together, so that you can see what the consequences of somebody doing something in their department is going to be on your department, because you might not be thinking about that. And that goes for tours on a wider sense, but everybody's in new ground here, and you might find that something pops up in video that's going to affect audio, like the delay that we had to deal with, and that's going to be a show affecting issue. And if you get out in front of it, then you can come up with a plan like what Karen and Dave did, so that the people who are in the most expensive seats in the house, their shows aren't ruined. So, you know, talking collectively, as time consuming as it can be, talking collectively about how your department is working on this show can throw up red flags. And if you can catch them earlier, you can hopefully address them, I would say. So as many interdepartmental production meetings as you can afford yourself in advance, as well as site visits and conversations with your promoter and your venue, as well as anyone, if there's going to be somebody on site looking after the health and safety measures, then, you know, as much communication as you can manage pre-show.
Curious to know if you guys normally would have an A, B, and C show that you did. And if so, was that helpful to you guys in figuring out which show you were going to bring into this venue?
I think, yeah. I mean, most of the productions I've done in the past, like when you're starting prep, or if you're entering a wide variety of venues, I think it's always super handy to have an ABC rig to put up. And also, I'm sure you can all attest to it that when you're advancing a show, sometimes the specs that you get sent are not correct, and you show up and you have to fit, you know, a tractor trailer into a way smaller space than you thought. So I think being adaptable and having those options is really important and really key, especially right now, because everything is just so uncertain, and we're all just trying to like make these weird kind of drive-in experiences great.
Right. Was there a ton of research and planning, you guys, that went into this?
Yeah.
Lots of it.
There was, and as you could probably tell earlier, a lot of it was on the part of the artist, especially on the video side of things. Leia and Peter dove headfirst into the video and the filming side of the show with the directors from those departments, and they really were, I think it was a challenge for our vendor Videotech approaching this. You know, our video team are kind of like these genius mad scientists who are not particularly used to working in live environment, but came up with these amazing creative solutions to the problems. And I think for somebody who's used to seeing it done this way, because that's what live production normally does, it was it took a bit of time for everyone to kind of get on the same page.
Yeah.
But
And I
think
guess that definitely speaks to flexibility.
absolutely, yeah.
Hybrid of the show, you know, because it's not just the live. It's very similar to kind of how we treat like award shows, because it like the people in the audience do matter, but the bigger show that we also need to be aware of is the live stream, you know. But you guys meshed all that well together, together really well. It was incredible.
Yeah, and you know, the small challenges that we ran up against in that context was, you know, it was a small trade-off for the amazing sort of end product that was super creative, and you know, the live stream, the quality of that was just amazing, and you know, I would easily take that again. I would, you know, deal with those challenges for us to end up with such an awesome end result. But the that came out of it for me was just, even after an extremely long day, extremely long and challenging day, everyone was still dealing with each other in a respectful manner, and still, you know, nobody was losing their head, and that speaks a lot to how the band surrounds himself, and the way that the priorities that we have when we're hiring crew.
Yeah. You know, Doug, Karen, I am so jealous that you got to bring your tribe together, that your crew got to come together and do another show. That's an amazing thing. The next time I can do that, I'll probably be bawling on stage to see everybody go through that. So I think everybody really enjoyed living vicariously through you guys today. So thanks for doing that and doing it safely. And honestly, I think it's a good role model. Like you said, every show, and even in the chat here, we see so many shows that are happening and popping up like this. So everybody has their own set of unique challenges, but still we can learn from Doug and Karen and the cast and crew of July Talk. So
thanks to Jim Spiz for hanging out in the chat and giving us some backstory on those Grove, the things going on in Southern California at the Grove at Anaheim. I was curious to know what was going on over there and how, and their consistency. So thanks, Jim, for popping in and contributing to the larger conversation about drive-in shows. Appreciate that.
And sorry if we didn't get to your question, but I think we covered most. So in the time.
There was a lot to unpack.
A lot.
So thank you for playing 1,001 questions, Doug and Karen, but everybody
be on the other side of one of these.
No, right?
Hey, Doug, can we put the video that we didn't have a moment, that cool video that you guys created? Could that go up on the TM 101 website?
Yeah,
so that
I'll do that. Yeah.
That'd be
Cool.
great. That'd be great.
It's just me walking around the site explaining everything I just did on the map, but it gives.
I think everyone would be interested in seeing that. I think.
Yeah.
Or maybe we can attach it to the end of the session that's archived. Yeah.
Right.
Instagram too, maybe.
Yep.
Awesome. Well, everybody have a great week. Join us on Thursday. We have a special guest, Nick Light. He's gone from being a tour manager to the Senior Vice President of Artist Development and Touring at Sony Music. So we're going to talk with Nick Light on Thursday, same time, same channel. Everybody have a great week. Watch your hands.
Do the wave.
Thanks,
Same
guys.
wave. Same wave.